All right, we made it to part 2. Thank you for coming back, listening to me for a bit more. Oh no. Now we're going to talk about money. Many people who write grants for the first time have a lot of experience implementing work, and they understand their community's needs. They've met their funders. However, often people that write a grant for the first time don't have a firm understanding of how to do project budgeting, and especially with the sometimes confusing terms and definitions that the U.S. mission will ask for. I am not an experienced budget writer. My sharing here is based heavily on a dictionary of budgeting terms from the U.S. government, and I will refer to these concepts quite a bit. And my goal is just to give you a start and a little bit of confidence while you're working with budgets. So here, this is the online glossary of U.S. government grant terms and budgeting terms. You need to become familiar with this. It's the ECFR. And anything you don't understand, you can find a definition that may or may not be clearer on here. So when I started out, I read through this when I don't understand a budgeting term. So let's find that budgeting mindset. Let's describe a winning budget. What we're actually looking at is text from the Notice of Funding Opportunity itself. And it says, the budget and narrative justification are sufficiently detailed and linked. What does that mean? The projects with budgets that do not match the program narrative and vice versa are unlikely to be successful. Okay, match, link. Costs are reasonable in relation to the proposed activities and anticipated results, and the budget is realistic, accounting for all necessary expenses to achieve proposed activities. The results and proposed outcomes justify the total cost of the project. Budgets are reasonable, allowable, and allocable. Now this text is on page 8 in the sample Notice of Funding Opportunity. And if we put these ideas together, we will see the concept of cost effective. Cost effective being the mindset that your budget should be reasonable, realistic, allowable, allocable, linked, and detailed. This is more of a mindset that your budget follows these 5 concepts. And now I will dig into the meaning of these concepts. We start off with what is reasonable. So, reasonable. A very large budget looks rushed and uninformed. It looks like you've asked for more than you can prove that you need. You've asked for things you're not allowed to ask for, or you've asked for things that are too high quality for what you need. You may need a laptop, but you don't need a MacBook. Maybe your budget is very small, and this can look naive. Maybe your project will run out of money. Maybe you have done no risk reserve. You have no risk reserve. And maybe the things you are going to buy don't meet the standards. You need to get the project done and represent the funder well. All right, I'll give you a very illustrative example of this. This is the idea of reasonable. We have 3 buses. Let's imagine that your project requires your participants to travel, and with a reasonable mindset, you will avoid excess costs. So instead of renting a helicopter, every one of your participants should take the bus. All right, now you want to make sure that your participants arrive on time. So your first bus is a public bus. No, you move on to a reliable private bus. Then you realize that you want to represent your funder very well, and you want to have control of the departure and drop-off location for participants. So you should rent a quality private bus. And this is reasonable. It is reasonable to take the bus and not to fly, but it is also reasonable to take a private bus and not to take an unreliable public bus. Next one is the budgeting concept of realistic. And when you think about realistic, you can think, what am I prepared for? Am I prepared for reality? Have you prepared for any risks? Did you purchase any spare materials? Have you purchased insurance for any travel insurance? Have you thought about the shipping costs? Have you considered renting things instead of buying them? Basically, do you foresee the risks and have you made any changes? The next one is, in realistic, are the quotations that you have collected from vendors, are they recent? Do they include excess fees? And you really need to think about this because the mission has seen many different budgets, and they know how much things cost. So if you are collecting out-of-date quotations or inaccurate quotations, that is not realistic. Furthermore, you have to consider the grant's cash disbursement schedule. Usually they give you X percentage of money in the beginning of the project, X percentage in the middle, and X percentage at the end. If all of your costs are in the front, then you have not made a budget that fits the cash disbursement schedule, and therefore it is not realistic. Allocable. Allocable sounds like a difficult word. I did have to look it up in that dictionary that I shared before. And allocable means that each budget item can be designated to a funder. So is it you who will pay for it? Is it the mission that will pay for it? Is it your partner that will pay for it? Also, it can be designated to a specific activity. And so this idea of allocable will come up again, so that it is the funder or the person that will pay for this is clear, and what part of the project this is linked to is clear. All right, linked. This is a similar concept to allocable, and it came on as a slash for the mindset, allocable / linked. A linked budget shows that the item that you are trying to buy directly impacts a specific objective. And you will justify this, saying, I need these computers for this reason, in the notes and justification section. You have to make sure that those two are always aligned. So, for example, you need to buy a laptop, mobile internet. These are necessary for your project to run. But if you don't tie in or link why you need these items to produce an objective, then they are not linked. And then funder does not really understand, because they cannot read your mind. Why do you need these items? All right, then we have this big long list of unallowed costs, and you have to read through them. It's really important that you read through this. And I just want to point out things that come up in education, because I'm focusing on education here. There is no funding for scholarships. There's no funding for things you are already doing and already being paid to do. No ongoing projects, no cash prizes for competitions. I know you want to have a hackathon, but not the cash part. Construction projects, not built, they're not going to build you a building or build you a school. No alcoholic beverages and networking events, and they will describe what that is, and no cost for translation. Translation is just something that you must bear. All right. Now we're going to look at the first document. We're actually looking at detail, the concept of detail. This is simple. When you are writing your budget items, you need to make sure that you divide it down to the unit cost, the quantity. You don't just lump some things together, you break them down and you write in the notes. This is where you do how they are linked. You don't just write project supplies, you write in the notes how this supply is helping you reach a goal. The detail is just that you are thorough with your budgeting spreadsheet, that your items are itemized one by one. All right, All right, everybody's favorite concept, cost sharing. Cost sharing is something that comes up again and again, and I just want to make sure that we have the same mindset for it. Cost sharing or cost matching means the proportion of the project's costs that the funder does not pay for. That means it's you or your partners. Cost sharing is a mindset. It is not simply splitting the expenses. It is a demonstration of your financial partnership between you, your partners, and the funder. Having many different partners, cost share, shows that you have a wide number of stakeholders that buy into your project. And it says very clearly in the notice of funding opportunity that proposals with strong cost sharing are very likely to be, or have a higher likelihood of being funded. Let's look at this concept of cost sharing. So here on the far left, we see that you have a part of the budget that is covered by the grant, and above it, the part that says share. If the share is very small, it looks like this project will not sustain. It is unconvincing that after the funder is done, you can continue. Then we look at the middle and we see that the share is larger, and then it is possible that the project can sustain and that the funder is just supporting you with this round. And then we get to the rightmost graph and we see that the share and that is cost shared and the part that is funded by the grant are the same. That is a 1-to-1 or 50%. This is considered very sustainable, and your funder is not your supporter. Your funder is in a sense now your partner. And after their funds have ended, you can probably continue to run the program yourself. So cost sharing can be not just cash, but you can cost share with in-kind contributions. In-kind contributions are non-cash goods. They're volunteer services, volunteer property and materials, effort, which is an expression of time, donations, shipping, transportation. Communication is a big area for cost sharing because we are talking about the public affairs section of the U.S. mission. They are very interested in getting their message out there to the local population. Final thought on this is don't cost share unallowed costs. It's not like the project is okay with you doing this as long as it is cost shared. Don't cost share this. Also, you do not get reimbursed for your cost share. Cost share is not, cost share is your contribution to the project. All right, the NOFO shows two different documents that it asks you, two different sections that you need to submit with your submission package. And it is confusing what these two different things are. So I gave them slightly clearer definitions. You need to submit these two similar documents, and the terms for both documents are confusing. So I called document A, which is a spreadsheet, the budget narrative spreadsheet, and document B, the budget narrative justification. This justification is a sentence by sentence explanation of the linkage and details of your budget. And it is written within the proposal template where document A is submitted as separately. Okay. Both budget documents will have the same budget categories. And we can go through simple definitions of what they are. First is personnel. This is the wages and salaries of temporary or permanent staff who are working directly on your project. And they need you to write the unit of time or the percentage of time that they are spending on the project. Then we have fringe benefits. These are costs of leave, employment insurance, pension, health insurance, unemployment benefit plans. Then there is travel. You must, as you put travel into your spreadsheet, you need to indicate who, where, how, what means of transportation, and why are they going there. Additionally, travel for humans and travel for equipment, that would be transportation, are separate things. Then in equipment and supplies, equipment are items that are above $5,000 and will be useful for more than a year. And supplies are tangible property that are not equipment. So equipment is above $5,000 and you use them for more than a year. Then you have contractual or contracts. These are contracts with sub-awardees and vendors. You have direct charges. These are all of the other charges that cannot be easily fit into the other categories. For example, printing service. If you are printing lots and lots and lots of manuals, printing is not a supply. It is creating a supply. It's not a travel, it's not equipment, but you have a cost, indirect costs such as printing. Sorry, that was other direct costs such as printing. And finally, indirect costs. Indirect costs are overhead for facilities and administration. Indirect costs, you need to look it up before you write this, are expressed as a percentage. You cannot really determine exactly what indirect costs are, such as the electricity, the air conditioner, the lighting, the security guard. All of these costs of running your classroom are indirect costs. Okay, so we talked about the budget narrative spreadsheet. At some points in the NOFO, it is called the detailed budget spreadsheet. As it's a spreadsheet, so it's a visual representation of your expenses. It is detailed and allocable, and you don't need to make up this spreadsheet yourself. This template is linked within the NOFO. So you just take it, you fill it in, and you notice the different blue categories and you follow them. If we look a bit closer, we break down the column headers for this spreadsheet. We begin with the item or the description of the item, its unit cost, quantity, the amount requested from the donor. So amount requested is from the donor. How much does the US mission need to pay for this? And the amount cost shared, which is how much are you or your partners going to contribute for this? And finally, the notes and justification, which is in yellow, and that's where you write the detailed linked information. It's very important that you're incredibly detailed here, because the more detail you put, the more transparent and the more reasonable and the easier it is for you to prove that your budget meets that cost-effective mindset. Of course, don't make up costs. Don't make up costs. It's just not going to work for you. You won't realistically be able to fit them into the budget. All right, the next is the budget narrative justification. This is you writing your budget spreadsheet as text in order to explain the expenses that you will have and how these expenses lead to impact. And give as much detail as possible and make sure that you use the same budget categories and the same budget items in the spreadsheet and the narrative. All right, so personnel costs. We talked about this. Let's give an example. In a sample justification for personnel costs might say, project manager, this individual is responsible for overall management of the project. They ensure compliance with all the terms and conditions of the agreement, and blah, 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 a bit more about them, and then their percentage of time and their costs. This next one is the fringe this is the fringe benefits. We discussed this briefly before. Next, we have travel. Just notice that the way that you express travel, separating employees and participants, separating the travel of people and the travel of supplies. And that when you are writing the budget for travel, you need to look into something called the US State Department's per diem rates. This is a special website that is going to tell you how much you can charge a US government contract for travel to and from a specific place. But this requires extra research on the internet for you to write the right travel rates. So we have equipment versus supplies. We talked about these before, and in your budget narrative, you need to explain why you need these supplies. And it's very important because some supplies without a clear link can be considered unclear, such as a SIM card. Yes, you use the SIM card for your mobile internet for the project, but you also use it for everything else. If you are going to list that as a supply, you need to write carefully how having mobile internet is critically important to this project and that you will use the SIM card for that. All right, we talked about other direct costs. In this case, we talked about photocopying and printing. There are a number of other direct costs. A big one is other direct costs is meals. Now, you're aware that you cannot buy any alcoholic beverages, but there is a scenario where you can purchase meals. You can purchase meals according to the definition from that glossary, and you must check it because that definition constantly updates. Often, you can charge the cost of meals and refreshments if you are giving a seminar, symposium, a retreat, or a meeting where you are transferring information from yourself to other people. So be very careful about this, that you are also not running a networking event. You need to be disseminating information, moving the project forward. And you need to check that this definition is still correct at the time that you're watching this video. Indirect costs or indirect charges. These are things that we talked about that you cannot easily calculate. Water bills, the lighting, the parking, the building security. These things you cannot easily charge the project. So you are allowed to ask for a rate. And this gets very complicated and it's worth definitely looking up. And should you have a conversation with the US mission in your country, you ask them what is the standard indirect cost rate. And this is why it's important that you go to a sharing session. All right, we made it. We made it. So we went through part one in the previous video, and you got a simple understanding of the motivations of our funder, the idea of project scoping. We went through a requirements matrix, and we talked about the basic sections of a proposal. Then what we covered in part two is the mindset of a cost-effective budget. We looked very briefly at the two budget documents, and we went through some examples and definitions of those budget categories. All right, what you need to do next is learn about the required registrations and the required forms. This information is somewhat straightforward, but you will need to talk about these with any funder you work with. Then it's time for you to begin drafting your concept into the template, filling in your budget documents, your required forms. And the first time, you might just submit it, you might just fail. If you fail, ask why you failed. Take that information and do it again next year, because the sample I gave you is recurring every year. So this is the end, and there's still a lot more to learn about grants. And if you're eager to continue to learn the basics, that's the roadmap. You have to learn the registration, write your template, try and fail. Anyway, thank you for watching. Good luck this year, good luck next year, and good luck with all of your grant writing pursuits.